Now, an international study has found that 8 out of 10 South African school children struggle to read well by the age of 10. The findings then coming from the US-based Progress in International Reading Literacy study that showed that 81% of South Africans aged between 9 and 10 do battle with reading comprehension. Well, South Africa scored 288 points compared with the international average of 500 points. It's worth saying, though, that alongside Morocco and Egypt, South Africa is only one of 3 countries which agreed to participate in this literacy and comprehension monitoring. Well, let's think a little bit about France, which has stabilised the level of reading amongst primary school children, but is still behind the European average. Let's get more on this. Thierry Rocher is Director for Evaluation at the DEPP. That's at the French Ministry of Education. Thierry, thanks very much for speaking to France 24 today. After 15 years, then, France has ultimately stabilised, you might say, or stopped the decline when it comes to reading comprehension. It's fair to say, though, Thierry, it remains behind other European nations, Finland, Sweden, Italy, for example. How do you explain that?
Thank you to welcome me and to be able to speak about this unique survey. As you said, I mean, it's an international survey where we can compare more than 60 countries around the world, more than 400,000 students. So it's really, and with trends over 20 years. So it's really unique. And yes, talking about France, we had a decline for over 20 years. I think it's the most interesting thing in the 2029 results that now we stopped this decline. We stabilized our results, even though there was this decline before. And another interesting thing is that when France stabilized between 2016 and 2029, most of the countries around the world, and especially in EU, we can observe a decline in this period, probably due to the pandemic situation.
Thierry, how do you explain the fact that France is behind other key European nations? I cited a few for you. You know, you have, who did I say? Sorry, I said Finland, Sweden and Italy. What is it that they're doing right but that France could maybe do a little bit more of?
Well, you know, in all this international comparison, it's difficult to find one factor. There is no magical recipe. If you look at the top performer countries, for example, Singapore or Finland or those... Poland, for example, yes. I mean, all these countries, they have very different education systems. So there is no one size fits all, and every country has to look at its own results and to dig in all this data and try to find some explanation. But there is no one magical country, let's say.
So I hear you say, Thierry, that every country should ultimately stay in its own lane and kind of, you know, worry about what its problems are. South Africa said, look, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, when many of our schools were closed, actually put us behind on our programme. France was one of the countries that were able to boast, if you will, that schools were open for quite a lot in France. Did that not make things better? Did that have any impact at all?
Very probably. I mean, it's something also we have to dig in the future, because now it's the first results that just came out, but now we have to do some secondary, more in-depth analysis. And as you said, to try to see what are the correlation between the time, how long the schools were closed during the pandemic, and the trend since the last survey in 2016. And it's true, there is probably something in it, and not, of course, a correlation that can apply to all countries, but a general trend that could maybe explain the fact that in the case of France, there was France resisted more to the COVID impact than maybe the other EU countries.
I mean, I suppose that the question to ask is should we be here in France just content with, you know, levels that have stabilised after 15 or 20 years, you said, or should we be looking at kind of, you know, climbing or reaching higher? And if so, how does the French government go about doing that?
I think, you know, you can look at the half-empty glass or the half-full glass. Here, what we at the French statistical department, we also like in this study looking at the half-full glass, which means that we observe a positive trend. It's a stabilization in this survey, which is in line with other surveys we have in France, showing that in the recent years, 5-6 years, on national assessment, we also can observe that there is a positive trend coming. So that's a good sign, a good positive sign for the education system of France. All these surveys goes in the same direction.
Thierry, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I'd just like to have a takeaway from you today. What is one thing that the French education system is doing that, in your view, it is working well and could help move things forward?
Well, difficult for me as a statistician to have a say on that. But just another, but linked to your question, I don't want to avoid that. There was in the study a very interesting result about the SES, the socioeconomic status impact, and we can see there is a huge difference in every country regarding the impact of the family background on student performance in reading, and this is in every country. France is in average in this study in PIRLS, and so there are ways to, let's say, to try to tackle these differences in different countries. And for example, in reading in France, we have assessed recently in my department policy regarding the class size reduction in early grades, and it produced some positive effects. So it's one factor among probably many others that we can say today.
All right, Thierry Rocher, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today on France 24. Thank you.
Thank you very much.